AITAH, for giving my husband exactly what he asked for. What happens when the person you've loved and built a life with for over 2 decades suddenly treats you like a burden? After 23 years of marriage, one woman found herself discarded at her weakest moment, physically ill, emotionally drained, and blindsided by the man she thought would never leave. But was she really the villain in the story? Or just finally giving him exactly what he asked for? Here's how it all unraveled. For 23 years, I wasn't just a wife. I was the foundation of our home. From the outside, we seemed like a strong couple who had it all together. But behind the scenes, I carried the emotional and physical labor that kept our family standing. I managed our finances, handled every bill, did the taxes, took care of our 2 kids, and even saw to the needs of our pets. 2 dogs, 2 cats, and a snake. I made sure birthdays were remembered, lunches were packed, doctor appointments were scheduled, and love was never withheld. I didn't just love him, I devoted myself to the life we built together. When my health began to decline, I still pushed forward. I didn't have the luxury of slowing down. I started seeing multiple specialists, 8 at one point, and was prescribed a cocktail of medications I had to take daily. I was exhausted all the time, often needing 12 hours of sleep just to function at a basic level. But even then, I tried to adjust our lives so no one else felt the weight of what I was carrying. I still worked full-time. I still smiled. I still made dinner. My husband often told me I needed to take better care of myself, and I listened. I fought to stay strong. But no matter what I did, my body was failing me, and worse, I could feel him quietly starting to pull away. He never said it outright, but the disappointment in his eyes was louder than words. I wasn't the version of me he signed up for. I was broken, and it made him uncomfortable. Even when things became unmanageable, like the night I had to go to the emergency room, I tried to be considerate. I offered to take an Uber so he wouldn't be inconvenienced. But when I got scared and asked him to pick me up, it ended in a heated argument. He wasn't angry because I was sick. He was angry because I asked him to care. That night he told me I should move out, that I wasn't capable anymore, that I should do the right thing and leave. The man I gave everything to, my time, my body, my loyalty, was telling me I was no longer useful to him. And despite everything I had sacrificed, he wanted me gone. I had always believed love was about standing by someone even when they're at their worst. That's what I did for him for years. I never imagined he'd walk away the moment I needed him most. But maybe I was wrong about what love really meant to him. After that argument, something shifted permanently between us. It was no longer about my health or my exhaustion. It was about worth, my worth. And in his eyes, I was now someone who didn't bring enough value to the table. I told him clearly, I'm not leaving the life I built. I meant it. I had invested everything I had, my energy, my youth, my loyalty, into this marriage. It wasn't just a relationship to me, it was a legacy. It was the home our children were raised in, the place our pets curled up by the fireplace, the meals we laughed over, the tears we cried in the hallway after tough days. You don't just walk away from something like that, but he could. And he did. A few days after that fight, he looked me in the eyes and told me he didn't want to be married to me anymore. He said he was miserable, that sorrow had filled him so completely he no longer recognized his own emotions, that it was inevitable our marriage would end. I stood there and listened as the man I had stood by during his job losses, his depression, his personal failures, now calmly dismantled our future with a few emotionless sentences. Still, despite my heartbreak, I tried to handle it with grace. I offered a 1-month no-contact break. I thought maybe space would give us both clarity. I thought maybe, deep down, he still loved me. But when I suggested it, he seemed almost happy. That's when it hit me. He had already emotionally checked out. Days later, as if to confirm my worst fears, he came back with an edge to his voice, warning me not to try to keep him from seeing his daughter. I was floored. That he would even think I'd weaponize our child against him told me how far gone he was, not just from our relationship, but from the version of me he used to love. So I snapped. With tears streaming down my face, I told him exactly what he probably wanted to hear. That I knew I was the one person he never wanted to see again, and that for 30 days he was not welcome in my home. That moment wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. I needed space to grieve what was clearly dying. I needed boundaries. And most of all, I needed to stop begging someone to care about me. Our daughter, who's 15, stayed with me. I never asked her to choose. I told her I'd support whatever she wanted. She kept in touch with her dad, and I respected that. I was proud of her maturity. But the fact that others around me started whispering that I was wrong for letting him leave, that somehow I should have fought harder, was a punch to the gut. How do you fight for someone who's already gone? After he told me to leave, something inside me broke, but not in the way I expected. I didn't cry right away. I didn't scream or beg. I just stood there, frozen, hearing the man I had built my entire adult life with tell me that I was no longer enough. Not as a wife, not as a person, not even as a person worth caring for. I calmly told him that I wasn't leaving. This wasn't just his life, it was ours. And more than that, it was mine too. I had poured everything I had into our home, our kids, our future. I wasn't going to be erased from the very foundation I helped lay, brick by brick. But he didn't stop. He doubled down, telling me I was incapable of keeping up with the responsibilities of our household, that I wasn't the same woman he married, that I should do the right thing and walk away. Do the right thing. For who? For him. It was clear then that this wasn't just about my health. Somewhere along the way, love had turned into burden. Care had turned into resentment. He wasn't offering support anymore. He was calculating value, and to him I had depreciated. Still, I tried to find a way to soften the tension. A couple of weeks passed. I suggested a 1-month no-contact break, hoping it might bring him clarity, or at the very least offer me a space to breathe. I thought he might hesitate, that he might resist or reconsider. Instead, he accepted the offer with enthusiasm, almost like he'd been waiting for me to say it. But what crushed me most wasn't the break itself. It was how he acted just before it. He came to me and, in a cold and detached tone, warned me not to prevent him from seeing our daughter, as if I would ever use our child as a pawn, as if he didn't even know me anymore. That moment shattered what little hope I had left. I yelled through tears that I understood, I was the only person he didn't want to see again, and for the next 30 days, he wouldn't have to. I blocked his number. I stopped sharing my location. I reclaimed a space that, for too long, had made room for someone who didn't want to be there. And yet, in the middle of it all, I remained a mother. I sat down with our 15-year-old daughter and told her she was free to stay in touch with her dad, that I would support whatever relationship she wanted to maintain. She chose to stay with me, but I never made her choose. That was important to me. Even still, people whispered, friends, family, that maybe I was too harsh, that maybe I let him go too easily. But what they didn't see is that he was already gone. All I did was finally stop chasing a ghost. After weeks of silence, I started convincing myself that maybe things weren't as final as they felt. Maybe space would shift something in him. Maybe he'd remember the woman I used to be, the love we once had. Maybe he'd choose us again. Then one evening, my daughter and I were sitting together in the living room, just enjoying some rare quiet time, when she said something that caught me off guard. I think he's going to come back home. I turned to her and gently asked why. Because he's lonely, she said. He's been texting me a lot. I mean, a lot. Like, he's being kind of extra. I didn't press her. I didn't want to put thoughts in her head or plant seeds of my own emotions in hers. Instead, I simply asked how she felt about that. She shrugged, said she wasn't sure, and I let it go. But inside, a part of me dared to hope again. A few days later, he did come back. Not with flowers, not with apologies, but with bags in his hand and exhaustion on his face. He wasn't coming home out of love. He was coming home because he was struggling, financially, emotionally, probably even logistically. And I, still clinging to the idea of healing what was broken, let him in. We talked. We agreed on one condition: therapy. If we were going to coexist again under the same roof with our daughter watching, it needed to mean something. He agreed, and for a brief moment, I let myself believe we were beginning again, that maybe the distance had opened his eyes to what we had. But hope is a dangerous thing when it's not shared. He went to one therapy session. One. Afterward, he dismissed it with a wave of his hand. Not for me, he said flatly. That was it. No further explanation, no compromise. The emotional wall came back up immediately. He withdrew completely. No touch, no warmth, no kindness. I confronted him about it, asked why he was acting like I didn't exist. He told me plainly, affection makes me uncomfortable. I'm not going to do those things anymore. At least not anytime soon. I asked, so I'm just a roommate now? He paused and said, I can see why you'd see it that way. The final piece of my heart broke that day. Not because he didn't love me anymore, but because he didn't even try to pretend he did. I had welcomed him back in with open arms, trying to believe in us one last time, and he came back only to make the silence louder. But through the heartbreak, something unexpected happened. I stopped fighting, not out of defeat, but out of clarity. I finally saw him for who he had become, and saw myself for who I had been trying so hard not to lose. After that conversation, where he confirmed that I was, essentially, just another body in the house, I didn't cry. I didn't beg for more. I didn't try to change his mind. Something inside me had shifted. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was clarity. But for the first time in this entire ordeal, I stopped chasing the version of love I used to believe we shared. Instead, I started focusing on something I hadn't prioritized in years: myself. I've always been a caregiver by nature, a planner, a fixer, a nurturer. For so long, my identity was built around being everything to everyone: his wife, their mother, the glue holding everything together. But when that role was ripped from me, when the man I gave my soul to made it clear he no longer saw me as his partner, I was left with a question I hadn't asked in decades. Who am I outside of them? My son, who's 20 and incredibly intuitive, noticed the shift. He saw the pain behind my calm and the effort it took to function in a house where the man I loved now moved like a stranger. One night, he sat me down and, with eyes full of worry, asked, "What happens if he leaves again? Can you take care of yourself?" I heard what he was really asking. Are you going to be okay without him? And I realized I had to be, not just for me, but for my kids. I couldn't let them see me break into pieces just because someone else didn't value me anymore. I needed to show them that being discarded didn't mean I was disposable. So I decided to stop expecting anything from him. No affection, no support, no shared future. I accepted the roommate arrangement, not because I wanted it, but because it gave me space to build a new foundation beneath my feet. I started going outside more, calling friends, making meals I actually enjoyed. I wasn't thriving yet, but I was surviving on my terms. And strangely, the less I depended on him emotionally, the more I began to see how deeply lonely he must be. He hadn't found happiness. He had simply escaped responsibility. But that was no longer mine to carry. I started protecting my peace like a precious resource. I created boundaries, not just physical ones, but emotional too. No more late-night conversations hoping he'd change. No more waiting for gestures that would never come. No more trying to decode silence into love. The irony is, I spent so long afraid of being alone. And yet, it was in the quiet that I started to feel myself again. Not the sick version, not the exhausted wife. Just me. I may have lost a marriage, but I was finally reclaiming something far more important: my sense of self. The strangest thing about heartbreak is that it doesn't always come with a dramatic ending. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a slow fade instead of a final goodbye. That's what our marriage became, not a sudden break, but a steady unraveling, until all that was left between us was silence and shared space. I stopped trying to revive what was clearly gone. He had made it clear: no affection, no intimacy, no emotional partnership. He wasn't my husband anymore, not in the ways that mattered. He was just a man sleeping in another room, eating meals in the same kitchen, breathing the same air. And I had already started grieving him while he was still under the same roof. But grief can be a strange kind of fuel. The more I stopped centering him in my world, the more room I found to center myself. I no longer arranged my day around his moods. I no longer watered a dead plant, hoping it would bloom again. Instead, I began rebuilding from the inside out. I started by tending to my body, the one that had carried me through illness, exhaustion, and emotional turmoil. I went for short walks. I ate meals that nourished me. I slept when I needed to, without guilt. I gave myself the care I had spent decades giving to everyone else. My friends showed up for me in ways I hadn't expected. They didn't try to fix me. They didn't rush me toward healing. They just sat with me in the mess, offering laughter, honesty, and the kind of presence that reminded me I was never truly alone. That love still existed, even if it wasn't coming from the person I once counted on most. As for my children, they watched me closely, not just to see if I'd fall, but to see how I'd rise. And I did, slowly, quietly, but unmistakably. I'm not saying it doesn't hurt anymore. Some mornings still come with a sting. Some nights still carry the weight of all that was lost. But the pain no longer owns me. It no longer dictates my worth. I used to think that allowing myself to become this weak, this dependent, this emotionally bare made me easy to discard. But now I see the truth. My vulnerability was never the problem. The problem was giving it to someone who no longer knew how to hold it. This will probably be the end of our journey together, at least in the way we once dreamed it. And while that truth still aches, it no longer breaks me, because for the first time in a very long time, I'm building a life that doesn't rely on someone else staying. I don't know what's next. I don't have all the answers. But I do know this. I'm still here. And that, after everything, is more than enough.